So, Tom, one of the first times I ever heard Sheriff Tom Allman speak when he was the Sheriff of Willits, we had an emergency preparedness convention in the community center. If you remember, that was like 2005 or 6. Yeah. And one of the things that Tom mentioned, we had a number of presentations from different agencies about how we would be prepared in an emergency. And one of the things that Tom said, which stuck in my mind, he said, just remember yo-yo. You're on your own. In a major emergency, all the agencies are going to be very, very backed up and very, very busy, including and especially the Sheriff's Department. Now, they've been working with us very consistently since that time, and certainly over this last year, to make us way more safer. But we have a new acronym, and it's called WITT. W-I-T-T, as in, let's get our wits together. We're in this together. And this is a super important message that we try and put forward and promote in Sherwood Firewise. We've got to work together. Fire does not respect your property boundary. So we've got to work together, and that's really the essence of Sherwood Firewise. So thank you so much for coming again, and we're going to start our next session in a few minutes.
No, we're going to start it right now.
And here is Keith to introduce it.
How many people attended our event last year, April 28th? I know there's some people that were here, quite a few. And at the time that came up, you might remember there had been the fires in Redwood Valley, and there was a lot of things going on. The county Supervisor Haschak is going to talk a little bit, had an ad hoc committee to study communities with one way in and out. So evacuation is a real big issue, not only in our community, but all over the place, not even the state of California. There's a lot of developments that have been built with really inadequate design for safe evacuation purposes. And so there's big challenges ahead of us, and all these gentlemen are going to speak to that. Just as by way of introduction, though, for me personally, why I got involved in this was that I had this map for over a decade that showed the 5, they call them emergency travel routes, 5 emergency travel routes, including Sherwood Road here, that had been in place, and I knew about them. I was on the fire department for a while. Well, after that fire, in the meeting we had in April, we were told that, no, in fact, those are no longer good. We only have Sherwood Road. And that is our current evacuation plan, is we have Sherwood Road as our evacuation route, and these are the new maps here. Now, there's a lot of reasons why all that happened, and we're not here to talk about any of that, but the point of it is that all I hear is we need more options to be able to get out of here if there is a fire. Sherwood Road, you can just imagine what might happen if everybody tried to hit Sherwood Road at the same time. Now, you're going to hear from all the officials here of how they'll try to orderly do that evacuation, and that's the reason we're doing these things, is we as a community need to understand what we need to do and understand how the public agencies are there to serve us, to make sure that we do it safely so that we minimize the amount of panic that's going on. Okay, so we have Supervisor John Haschak. He's going to be speaking from the county's perspective. We have Rick Ehlert, who's the head of the OES, Office of Emergency Services. That is the agency that does the evacuations, so they're the ones that lead it. And we've got Todd Patten, Battalion Chief Todd Patten from CAL FIRE. They're the ones that are coming along with Brook Trails Fire Department to protect first our people and our property, and then the forest. And so they're all dedicated to saving lives and saving property. And again, these are very complex issues. There's a lot of things we have to deal with in this new environment of climate change. There's a lot of money involved, a lot of politics involved, a lot of old real estate issues that we have to deal with, and then we're going to have a lot of feedback as far as any questions you might have. So why don't we welcome our panel, please.
So thank you all for coming out. This is and thank you to the Firewise Council, because they've just been awesome. And so we've been doing a lot in the last 4 months of just trying to coordinate all the agencies and making sure that we're all on the right path, because like Keith said, the most important thing we need to do is create options for in case there's an emergency. and to make sure that there's not just the Sherwood Road going out, but other options. And so I think that we've got great collaboration between the county and CAL FIRE and then the local agencies. Just yesterday, we had a meeting between Little Lake Fire District, because they have a lot of area right on the eastern side of Brook Trails going down to 101. We had the Brook Trails Fire Department, we had CAL FIRE, and the county represented. And so all those agencies working together, I think we were able to look at what's been going on and what we need to do in the future. And so certainly Brook Trails has a plan, but it's coordinating all the different plans that we have to make a real unified strategic protection area, to make sure that we're protected, with fire breaks, with shaded fuel breaks, with some vegetation management, and then also the access routes. And so I think we're really making a lot of progress there. Rick Ehlert from the Office of Emergency Services is going to talk about fire sirens, and then also the cameras that the county is dedicated to put in throughout the county. And also some of the grants that we're applying for to make sure that we can get some more. And so those will help to identify the fire early on. And so I just wanted to say that on June 4th and 5th, which is a Tuesday, Wednesday, June 4th and 5th, that the county is going to be dealing with its budget. And some of the issues on the budget have to deal with providing money to go for some of these grants. And so I think it's important for everyone to know that that's going to be on the agenda on the 4th and 5th. And so if anyone's interested in having input or advocating for certain uses of the county money, that's the time to go do it. Because I think that we need to, the top priority needs to be the safety for our communities. Let's see, just recently we've been working on these MOUs for like the Furco Road, and we certainly, with CAL FIRE, we've gotten an agreement of all the landowners along the Furco Road, which kind of goes from, is it Poppy? Yeah. Poppy down to Highway 101 near the Northern Exchange. And so they've got their agreements with the landowners. We also have, with Brook Trails, we got MOUs from the 3 landowners, and I just got Mendocino Redwood Company to sign on to an MOU, which completed it. And the MOU will kind of help the county be able to do some road work and maintenance on those to make sure that it's they're in suitable condition for whatever use we need to use them for. An MOU is a memo of understanding, sorry about that. And so it's an agreement that the county or Brook Trails, whomever it is, can go in and do some road work on that to upgrade the roads a little bit. That's what I've been doing, and I really appreciate the collaboration of all the fire districts and CAL FIRE. Certainly with Governor Newsom, putting this, trying to fast track some of the vegetation management programs in the state, and Brook Trails being number 20 out of all of the state, that's certainly a good deal.
It's actually both projects are listed again. Pine Mountain and this.
Pine Mountain, Sherwood, so it's a great deal, and we're looking forward to just doing as much as we can, and we hope to get as much as we can done this season, and we're certainly looking ahead towards the future seasons too. So,
John, can you address the ad hoc committee and the CSA 3 for ongoing funding beyond grants and such while you're talking about it?
Right, so I'm on this ad hoc committee of Supervisor Jurdy, who represents Fort Bragg in the coast area, and myself. And so we've been looking at some of the real problem situations throughout the county of communities with one way in, one way out. certainly Brook Trails and Sherwood Road, being the 4th largest population center in the county, is top priority. And so we're looking, and it's great because the Firewise Council is being such a great partner in this, that we're looking to see, what we do here and then use it as a template to use it in other areas of the county. And certainly Pine Mountain's has a great Firewise Council too. But there's people, just kind of starting off with this. They're a year or so behind where we are. And down in Deerwood, the eastern hills of Ukiah, and then also Simpson Lane out of Fort Bragg. And so we're hoping that what we do in Sherwood Road here is what we can do in other places throughout the county. And one of the ways that we're looking at some funding for that might go on, and ongoing funding, is there's a thing called the County Service Area 3, which was kind of not in use for the last 10, 15 years or so. And what we did was we got it back going. We put, I think, $150,000 into it. The state wanted to close it down, but we said, no, we can use this as a vehicle to create some zones of benefit. So what it would do is, if Brook Trails and Sherwood Road decide that they want to assess themselves a fee to maintain some of these access roads that we might be able to get going, just to rock it, like minimal levels, then that's one thing that we could do. We could look at that assessment area and say, these are the people who will benefit, because people in Gualala don't really want to pay for the Sherwood Road corridor, but you people might. And so that's one thing we'd look at. We were even talking maybe, it could be as little as $10 a year or something, just so we have like $10,000 or $15,000 to rock these roads, to just do the basic maintenance, to keep some of those options open. And so, and there's, we can use that for whatever, and we can make it as big or as small as we want to, but that's one of the things we're looking at in this ad hoc committee. And certainly there won't be any fees or anything unless the people vote for them,
So my name is Rick Ehlert. I'm the Emergency Services Coordinator here for the Mendocino County, for the Mendocino County Office of Emergency Services, or the acronym you'll see all the time is OES, so that stands for the Office of Emergency Services. So I'll just touch on the hazard mitigation type funding, the grants that Supervisor Haschak talked about, and then I would like to actually invite Sheriff Allman come up and talk about evacuation, because while my office helps coordinate a lot of the preparedness efforts, it is not me that makes the decision to evacuate, it is the sheriff. The sheriff has legal authority to order evacuations during an emergency. Fire departments don't have the legal authority to order evacuations. It's not to say if a firefighter comes up to you and says you should evacuate, you should probably evacuate, but the actual legal authority rests with law enforcement. So I'll invite Sheriff Allman to come up and talk about evacuation and what the sheriff's office does with evacuation. But to kind of follow up with the grant applications that the county is currently pursuing. So the County of Mendocino has applied for several hazard mitigation grant applications. So basically it's a grant that the FEMA offers. They have kind of annual amounts of money that are made available throughout the year, but they're very competitive. They're nationally competitive, so we'd be competing against, Texas, against Florida, against places that are affected by hurricanes, people that all across the country. But what happens is after a disaster, a federal disaster is declared in the state of California, they open up an additional pool of funding to try to help prevent future disasters from occurring in that state. So we've applied for a pool of funding that was made available after all the fires. I think the pool of funding we applied for is actually after the fires in Southern California, the landslides that they had down in Santa Barbara County. And so it's a little less competitive because we're just competing against other agencies within the state. So the Mendocino County's applied for several grant applications. The two that the public seems to have the most interest in, one is for fire sirens, which Brook Trails has signed a letter of commitment for to participate in this fire sirens. So the idea is we shouldn't call them fire sirens. They're basically all hazard sirens. So basically they can be used for a variety of circumstances. We use sirens on the coast already for tsunamis, just like we could use sirens in here for evacuation type. So it's a siren application for public alert and warning. We've submitted the application, the county submitted the application. There's no guarantee we'll get the funding, but from what we've heard, we're probably pretty competitive, so there's a good chance we'll be getting the funding for it, but it's by no means a guarantee. The one thing I will like to put out there is these grants give us a way to purchase something that we would not otherwise be able to purchase. There's still a 25% match, so we have to come up with some money at the county level, but it's a lot less than paying for the whole thing by ourselves, which we probably couldn't afford in a lot of these cases. The downside is they're not quick. So we've applied for previous hazard mitigation funding like about a year ago, and we still haven't heard back on whether or not we've gotten it. So they're not quick process. That is the big downside with it. We get money to do something we otherwise might not be able to afford to do, but it takes a little bit longer. So the idea with the sirens are, once we hear that we've been awarded funding, we'd start a feasibility process, kind of do some mapping, figure out, kind of do some acoustics to say, hey, if we put a siren here, how many people would hear it? Is there power there? This is a good location. Can we actually put the siren there? Is it going to go on public property, private property? If it goes on private property, will the landowner agree to it? So all kind of figuring all that will be the first step once we hear we've received funding. And then the idea is we'd put sirens in afterwards. The one thing as we look more and more at the sirens, we realize it's not a magic bullet. A lot of people think it's the silver bullet that, you know, with all else fails, we will activate these sirens and everyone will hear it. And what we found through some looking and talking to other people is these sirens don't work very well unless you're in some place like Kansas. They work really good for tornadoes when you're in flat land, no trees, no hills, anything like that. But in a terrain like here, it's going to be tough. It's not going to notify everyone. It's just going to be another tool that we can use to notify people. So if one system fails, this is a system that might work, but it's not going to be the end-all be-all. Trees muffle it quite a bit. Apparently, they did a test in Rancho Navarro recently of some sirens, and it did not work very well in Rancho Navarro and Anderson Valley just because the trees muffled a lot of the sound and the topography of the area. So that's one of the applications we're working on. The other thing is fire cameras. Basically, the idea is it's a modern version of a fire lookout. You're kind of putting somebody up on a hill. The one little caveat we want to put in for the cameras we're currently looking at is they're not early detection systems. They're kind of situational awareness, because the idea is we'll make these camera feeds publicly available so anyone can go on and look, and hopefully we can have a bunch of people watching during like red flag warnings when fire risk is the highest, and if they see something on the cameras they can call us, but we can't like guarantee that we can assign and pull a dispatcher off their normal duty to have sitting and watching a camera 24/7. So the idea is once a call comes in, we would then be able to activate these cameras at dispatch. The dispatchers would have the ability to pan, tilt, zoom them in, and we'd be able to better identify more quickly how big the fire is, where it is, and so we can better assign resources at that time. We are looking at, with our hazard mitigation grant application, some early form detection systems where I can kind of detect smoke plumes on the cameras, and can possibly even use pay for satellite time. So where there's some satellite systems out there that are subscription based, they're not cheap at all, but they can detect fires once they reach a certain size just off of the heat that they're putting off. So we're looking at some things like that with our hazard mitigation grant application as well, but we are definitely getting some sirens here relatively soon. The first round of sirens has actually been donated to Mendocino County by the Scripps Institute. So it's a partnership between several universities and the Scripps Institute based out of San Diego, where they've been kind of purchasing these cameras to go around the county, and we're looking at basically putting them on our existing county antenna sites. So basically they're going to go up where we have radio antennas already. The reason we have radio antennas there is because they're on top of high mountains, so they're good locations, they have power and everything like that. And so we are expecting to receive the cameras very soon, if not already, and then we'll be working with Scripps on actually installing these cameras throughout the county. And then once they're installed, we'll be putting out information about how the public can go and view them and how they're going to be set up and all that sort of thing. But the idea is it's just another tool to kind of better assess what's going on, what's happening, and where it's happening at. So that, and then I'll talk a little bit more about alert and warning and evacuation after Sheriff Allman comes up here and talks about evacuation as well.
Thank you. If I'm preaching to the choir is going to save themselves. And I appreciate you being here on a Saturday afternoon. Thank you very much. My wife says I need to get out more because this is really exciting to me.
This is out.
Evacuation, communication is a key. Communication is a key to you and to us for a safe neighborhood. And if we learn from lessons, we learned from the Oakland fire that happened over 20 years ago, and we certainly have learned in 2017 and 2018 in Mendocino County things that we were doing and things that we should be doing. And that's unfortunately government's slow in learning, but once we learn, we never forget. So let's talk about evacuations. And my wife and I lived on Herod Drive for 12 years. We lived in Brook Trails. I certainly know the frustration on a Friday afternoon trying to get home or a Monday morning going to work. And you look at that 2-lane road, and let's compare that to Oakland. And what happened in the Oakland fires, people were taking both lanes out of Oakland and the fire engines couldn't get up. And what happened in Oakland, the Oakland fire engines couldn't even talk to the San Francisco fire engines because they had never had a need to do that before. And so now we're getting into the area where if you want to look at evacuation and say, give it a good definition, I'm going to say it's organized chaos. It really and truly is. And that's why we're counting on good communication. As soon as we know that there's any kind of an inkling of danger in a community, such as Brook Trails, we immediately post on Facebook. I know not everybody has Facebook, I'm sorry. I'm just telling you the vast majority of the community looks at it at Facebook, and we have the Department of Transportation, we have the Highway Patrol going to the Sheriff's Office Facebook because we put everything on there as quick as possible. During the Redwood Valley fires, I, as your sheriff, was going to our Facebook to find out the newest information, no joke, because our Facebook coordinator was getting the information and putting it on there before anybody else. You should know that during a disaster, law enforcement does not hide anything from the public. We want you to know as much as we do as soon as we know it, because we want you to make an educated decision. As we go through this evacuation, if you hear the phrase mandatory evacuation, please don't think that if you say, I'm not going to evacuate to one of our deputies, that we're going to arrest you. No, we're going to wish you well. And we're going to go on to the next people who want to know the information and want to get out of there. Because the time it takes to arrest you and get you out, my deputy could have evacuated 100, 200, 300 people. We just want to give you information. So if you want to be if you remember at Mount St. Helens, the guy named Harry Truman, who's now at the bottom of 100 feet of hot lava somewhere because he wouldn't evacuate, if you want to be Harry Truman, you have that right. We live in a free democracy and you have that right. We're not going to take you out kicking and screaming. So when we do a warning evacuation, what we're saying is really and truly, get your medicine, get your pets, notify your out-of-state families, listen, we're out of here. We're going to be going, find that one person out of state that everybody can call and get the communication. We remember, if you lived here in 2017 for 4 days, when Willits and Brook Trails lost cell phone, 911, internet, and hardline phones. Well, we couldn't send smoke signals because the air was pretty full of smoke. And I was in Ukiah, and my wife was here in Willits. I know the frustration of not being able to communicate. You need to pre-plan that with your out-of-state relatives to say, if we have a fire, I'm going to call you, and you can let all my other siblings know where I am and I'm safe. Because if we lose communication, we lose communication. Let me tell you, 60% of Mendocino County only communicates on cell phone. All right? Well, when there's a power grid decision, when PG&E, and I support the power grid decision by PG&E, when they cut that power, the vast majority of our cell phone towers do not have alternate energy. They didn't put the foresight into putting solar panels where we could have 12 hours of energy, and certainly we're working with the supervisors to make sure that happens in the forefront now. But when PG&E cuts power, you've lost your cell service. Also, when PG&E cuts the grid down, like I said, I support it, we've lost the ability to activate these sirens that Rick is talking about. So for every action, there's an equal reaction, and we're trying to come up with the right way to make it happen to where we can communicate as much as possible. So I hope that everybody, when they walked in, grabbed that trifold white piece of paper right here, right? Does everybody grab that? Okay. When you open it up, the second thing down on this page here talks about how to register to get your information, your cell phone and your email, getting the information as quick as we put it on. Please register. Please, I promise you there's no conspiracy. The government's not following you around. We couldn't decide if today was Saturday, okay? But we can put out nixle. We give you as much information as possible. Whether it's a fire, whether it's an earthquake, whether there's a bad guy with a gun running around, we throw the information out and let you make that decision. So if you really and truly are here on your Saturday afternoon to learn as much as possible and be safe, keeping your family safe with the communication and making that decision is something very important. So I'm going to, in real quickly, I just want to make sure you understand. Prescriptions, pets, things that maybe aren't listed in here but are so important to you, you have to make sure that you're taken care of. Gun safes, what we've learned in Redwood Valley, please don't leave all your important paper in gun safes in a fire. I can show you lots of pictures of gun safes in Redwood Valley that were big piles of molten metal with everything burnt up inside.
And a fire safe will not survive a wildland fire either.
Unless it says this is a fire safe rated for 4 hours at 1500 degrees, it is not a fire safe. So keep those important papers with you, and all those heirlooms, keep them in your car. So what we'll do, here's my promise to you. We will give you as much information as soon as possible and help you make a decision. But when we make a decision to evacuate, then that's when we're going to come in and we're going to tell you what roads you can use and what roads you can't use. If you remember, if you were here in 2008, in 1 hour between June 21st and 22nd, we had 134 fires because of lightning. If you add all the fire engines together in Mendocino County, we have 50 fire engines, and we had 134 fires that burned all summer. What I'm telling you is, don't count on government being on your front door when there's smoke. We're going to give you as much information, let you make a decision, keep your family safe. If you evacuate your house, leave a note on your door that says, contact me, this is my cell phone number. And if there's a problem with a house, by all means, we'll let you know. If you have a large animal, horse, cows, not many in Brook Trails, but there are some, think about it ahead of time, and we will help you. We have animal control that comes in, and we are going to be taking care of animals. The Savings Bank of Mendocino County just donated a huge animal trailer to us where we are going to be able to come to a community and take care of 50 dogs and 50 cats and work with the community with food and so forth. So I know how important those things are to you. I don't want your life to be risked because you can't get your dog loaded. We will do everything we can, but your life is very, very important to us. So thanks for being here. The Sheriff's Office is always available to come to a community and talk about this. Rick is very good. He's been with the Sheriff's Office for many years. And unfortunately, we've been baptized by fire, so to speak. I'm going to end with this one thing. I've talked to a lot of people in Redwood Valley who have told me things they wish they hadn't done. I can tell you they wish they hadn't had gutters. There's no reason to have a gutter on your house. We all get wet, okay? But here, and do not raise your hand. If I ask you to raise your hand in this room right now, if you took sleeping pills every night, I'm telling you statistically, 30% of everybody in this room would raise their hand. And I'm telling you in Redwood Valley, some people say they have no idea how they got out of the fire because their neighbors went in and pulled them out, and they don't remember because they take Ambien, some of the other sleeping pills at night. And they do not remember what happened, or they didn't hear the phone calls that we were sending to them. So if you take sleeping pills, okay, I want you to really and truly think about it and say, is this something that you want to do? And if it knocks you out, it knocks you out, but just think about it. It's more than just a convenience, it could be your life. Thank you.
Just to follow up with what Sheriff Allman said about alert and warning. So basically, Mendocino County uses two main notification systems for kind of emergency notifications. Social media, we have the ability to share information quite rapidly, and we also have the ability to share what other agencies are doing. So it's very easy, and this is one of the reasons we use Facebook and social media so often. We can share what CAL FIRE is pushing out just by resharing it. we're sending a notification, we have to take that information CAL FIRE put out, copy and paste it, put it in a notification, define the area we're sending it to, and then send the notification. So it's very easy for us to put information on social media rapidly. So that's one of the reasons we use it so often. But the two main notification tools that we use for emergency notifications is Nixle and Everbridge, which we kind of branded as Mendo Alert, but the actual vendor is Everbridge. So you can go to mendocinocounty.org/Mendo Alert, and we have a pretty detailed FAQ, frequently asked questions, about both systems. It tells you how to register for both systems, a lot of information about the pros and cons of both systems. My biggest ask for everyone is a lot of people register for Nixle and not the Everbridge system. I really recommend that people register for the Everbridge system. It is by far the more powerful system for the most part. A lot of people register for, Nixle is very easy to register for. You can just text your zip code to 888-777 and you're registered. Very simple, very easy, but you will only receive notifications via text message. If the cell towers aren't working and you have a landline, you will not receive a notification. So the Everbridge system is a far more powerful system. It allows us to notify people via text message, via phone call to cell phone call to landline, phone call to business line. So that's how you can register for the Nixle system. So 3 8s, 3 7s.
And type in Mendo Alerts.
So yeah, so you can either text your zip code and then you'll only receive notifications for that zip code that we send. You will not receive all county notifications. Or if you text Mendo Alerts, plural with an S on there, you'll receive notifications to the entire county. So it's kind of, you choose how many notifications you want to receive. If you're traveling around the county a lot and you want to hear what's happening in Fort Bragg, you can do that. And any Nixle notifications sent in the county, you will get it as well.
And the Everbridge address is what?
So you can get to both from mendocinocounty.org/Mendo Alert. So it has information about both registration systems. For the Everbridge, you have to register online. If you don't have internet access and you don't want to use I recommend using the county libraries, use somebody else's computer, something like that. You can call me and I can register you manually as a last-ditch effort. I do not like doing that because I cannot make sure your information is correct. It's all over the phone. If I do a typo, you may not get the notification. I really want you to get the notification. So if you can register, work with somebody else to have you register and actually put your eyes on it, make sure all the information is correct, that's the best way to go. And the Everbridge system also allows you to register multiple addresses. So you can register your address, you can register your kid's address, you can register your parents' address, you can register your kid's school address and get notifications if there's emergencies around there. Because what we really like trying to do is we want to send out as much information as possible, but we don't want to over alert people. We don't want to send out that. I just recently, actually, it's kind of good that this came after it, but I attended a 2-day alert and warning conference in San Francisco. So on Thursday and Friday, I was in San Francisco doing an alert and warning conference. And one of the big things that they talked about is a lot of jurisdictions used to use Nixle and stuff like that for everything. Garbage pickup is a day late, something like that. And people disenrolled from the systems because of it. So we like to just send emergency notifications, and we like to just send emergency notifications to the people affected. So whenever we send an emergency notification, we always try to geolocate it. We try to say, if it's something that's affecting Hopland, the people in Westport might not care about it, might not need to know about it. So we are just going to send it to the people in Hopland. And there's another reason we do that is our telecommunications infrastructure in Mendocino County is not the greatest. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of that. Some of you probably don't have high-speed internet at home because they don't offer it. Our telecommunications infrastructure is not the strongest and can only handle so many notifications going across at one time. Only so many people can be on the phone. I'm sure you all have been at some special event and your cell phone's not quite working right, even though you have signal. It's probably because there's too many people at the fair and that cell tower is overloaded, and that's something that can happen. So we really try to geotag our notifications to the affected area and the surrounding areas so that we can get the notifications to people that really need to know about it. One of the things they talked about quite a bit at this conference is giving more people access to the notification system, send out notifications. In some counties, they only have 1 or 2 authorized people to send alerts. So basically, if there's an emergency in the middle of the night, they have to wake up one of those 2 people to send a notification out to the folks. So basically, in Sonoma County in 2017, only their emergency services folks 4 or 5 of them are authorized to send out notifications. What we do in Mendocino County is all Mendocino County Sheriff's dispatchers are authorized to send notifications out. They're all trained on how to send notifications out, and the sheriff has delegated the authority to send notifications out to any deputy on duty, to myself and some others, so that if we need to, there's plenty of people to make the decision. I think most people show up to an incident and they can see whether or not it deserves to have a notification sent out. We don't want them to have to call the lieutenant or call the sheriff and wake him up and say, hey, sheriff, is it okay to send us out? If you show up to something and you know it's bad, we're giving those public safety officials the ability to send out the notification to the affected area right away.
And speak today about evacuation planning. Just a quick thing, he didn't want to go down the rabbit hole with PG&E, neither do I. But I do want to state, if there is a fire, the power is going to go out. And if PG&E senses the heightened fire danger and decides to turn the power off, either way, the power is going to be off. Because we've heard a lot of concerns of folks that have home respirators and the like regarding PG&E in red flag situations turning off the power. Well, you need to be prepared for that either way, because as we all know with the fires we've had the last couple of years up and down the state, as soon as the fire hits, whether the fire came from PG&E or went toward PG&E, the power goes out. So just be prepared both directions. Along the evacuation planning, to dovetail into what Rick said and Sheriff Allman, we have a seamless relationship with the fire service and law enforcement. Black Fire a couple years ago, I was the incident commander. We saw a need for evacuation, and Sergeant, now Lieutenant Shannon Barney, was already there ordering the evacuations. So it is a very seamless, very cooperative relationship between the fire and law enforcement in this county. Currently, our senior staff, with my input, is working with law enforcement, the local fire district here at Brook Trails, and also with Willits Fire. They're going to involve the Sheriff's Office and Willits Police Department and do some comprehensive evacuation planning for different communities. That's not to say that there's not a plan in place, but the lessons that have been learned in the last couple of years, both here in Lake County, obviously Butte County, Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, you start listing them off, and quite a few counties out of the 58 Mariposa County have experienced the need for large-scale evacuations. There's been a lot of talks on that. Our unit chief is very serious that we put together a plan, and it's too early to say what that plan would be, but some of the thoughts in it is if everybody right now was told they had to get out of this room, there's a door there, and a door over here, 90% of the people would go straight for that door because that's the door you came in. So that's some of the thought process going into the evacuation planning that the fire service, law enforcement, and OES are currently working on. As many of you heard, the governor has declared a state of emergency, and with that, in true government fashion, approximately a month and a half ago, we received notification at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday that we needed to come up with 3 plans that were not already planned for shaded fuel breaks within our areas. My battalion, which is this area, the Ukiah area, and Laytonville. And we had till I'd like to say 5, but we didn't. We had till 4 o'clock to not only identify those areas, but get out there and take a picture of what they look like. So we sat down in the GIS office and we did, fortunately the 3 battalion chiefs were there, and Mike Maynard has his plan in Battalion 3, which is Ukiah Hopland, and mine involved a shaded fuel break from the northeast corner of Brook Trails down to 101, possibly involving some more area to the north, and back along Sherwood Road, and taking in all of the subdivision. And also in the Pine Mountain area off of the Willits watershed, clear up into Pine Mountain and somehow down to Tom Kai Road. We got those sent in, all 3, and lo and behold, my project was selected and the Ukiah project was selected. They were selected, funded, and have a time limit of December 1st to be completed. However, they were pared down in Sacramento to a certain extent. So since then, we have been, based on the declaration of emergency, they have not eliminated CEQA requirements for our projects. So it's kind of a catch-22. The fuel management projects we had planned prior to this declaration were not included. So they have to go through the complete CEQA process, which is time-consuming. But they streamlined the current, for these declaration projects, they streamlined it. And we've almost completed the CEQA requirements for my project and for Chief Maynard's. And they also streamlined the contracting. Normally for us to enter into a contract, state of California, with any construction, any sort of, any contract, it is about an 8-month process. Well, that's how long it's we're supposed to be done within 8 months. So they've streamlined that, and so that we're going to be able to, once we get all our ducks in a row, enter into a contract for equipment needed to be able to complete these projects by December 1st. So with that, I can give you an update on the projects in my battalion. We do not currently have completely signed agreements, but we have firm commitments from 5 private property owners to construct a shaded fuel break along the old Furco Hall Road, which is near the airport, down to the old mill site on 101. And that is 100 foot from center line both directions, with a masticator, which is a giant grinder on the end of an excavator arm, and fire crews following behind. They will be eliminating small trees, thinning the trees, limbing trees up 10 foot, and grinding dead and down stuff that's on the ground, and creating, it will not be bare ground. The trees, the larger trees are going to be standing, but it will be a way so you don't have ladder fuels in that area. By ladder fuels, I mean so you have a fire along the ground and it climbs up dead branches, and now you have a crown fire which is burning the tops of the trees. It will eliminate the ladder fuels and create a defensible space, one that we can put fire engines on, fire crews. Also, something that's really overlooked, when our air tankers drop, most of the retardant, if they were to make a drop right here, a very small percentage of the retardant would hit the ground. If an air tanker can drop along a shaded fuel break, that percentage goes up to 50 and above of the retardant actually hitting the ground. And it's not all wildland fires become a crown fire. And this just gives us an opportunity with these areas that our retardant, our helicopters will be able to get the retardant on, or our tankers will be able to get the retardant down where it needs to be, and we can safely put folks in there to begin suppression activities. I say we don't have the signed agreements. We have firm commitments from the property owners. The paperwork has been sent to Sacramento, and they're going to review it, and hopefully within a 10-day period we will have signed documents. The contracting process, we're not sure how long it's going to take. The hope is a 2 to 3 week process once we have it in place into Sacramento, that we can call the contractor and put him to work. The other project begins over by the Willits watershed, right along Highway 101. It's going to utilize a fire line that we actually put in during the Redwood complex that wraps around, takes off to the side of Lake Morris, which if you look at a map is the further north lake of the Willits watershed. And we'll head up onto a ridge line that we're well aware of. We put the line in 2017, and will make its way to the east around Old Boy Scout Road and down, hopefully, Mariposa Creek to Tom Kai Road. That is in the process now of us negotiating, educating, working with Pine Mountain Fire Safe Council, and getting folks to sign agreements so that we can begin the process on that. And again, that one, those two are a high priority. Of the 35 that made the cut, I'm not sure of the numbers, but both mine and Chief Maynard's are in the top 2/3 of those projects. The funding is purely from CAL FIRE, but we respect private property rights, and we are working diligently with different property owners, and they may have different requests of us. There may be some that don't want our fire crews, but would prefer our engine crews go in and do some of the crew work. That's the kind of thing that we can work with them on. It's a win-win for the private property owner, and we get our fuel break, and the community has a little line of separation from a car fire along 101 racing up here on a northeast wind day, or a fire up here, a simple car fire from here on a typical west wind day, pushing down toward Willits. So it's all moving ahead. It's very slow. I'm the type of person that I'd like to see it happen a lot faster, but to be realistic, watching how long it takes other programs to get through the state, it is impressive how much quicker this is moving.
Just what Chief Patten was saying, that the CEQA is the environmental review, California Environmental Review, and so that's been streamlined, and so it's making it a lot quicker to do some of these projects that CAL FIRE wants to do, right?
Normally it'd take over 2 years to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so before we take questions, I just wanted to say that Sherwood Firewise did get a grant funded from the Community Foundation to do evacuation planning for the Sherwood corridor. And so this summer, we're going to be doing some education. This is sort of our kickoff event to educate ourselves about how all this works and to be better prepared, and also how we can cooperate with what's going on, because the better prepared you are as an individual is great, but the better prepared we are as a community is even better. And that includes improvements like we talked about in the prior session, having more water in various places, having our homes cleared out and prepared for fire, do the home hardening, all those kinds of things. But just be aware that we're going to be doing for the next several months a series of classes and workshops around how we're going to do evacuation planning and working with the agencies in educating ourselves and better preparing. And this is something I wanted to ask Rick to talk about a little bit. We would like to plan to have some practice drills. And this doesn't mean everybody, but it just means we can test the Nixle system for alerts, things like that. We could have some groups of people, like we took a caravan of cars, for example, up the Sherwood Road North to the cutoff at 101, because a lot of people hadn't driven that route before, and that's a possible evacuation route, as you might have to go north rather than going down into town. That was really effective. A lot of people felt a lot more comfortable with that. We've talked about temporary refuge areas where we don't have to drive all over the place, if we can just get to someplace safe. So identifying those big open fields that we can keep clear and have some water there on site, those kinds of things are things we can do as a community, and we have a little bit of funding to start developing those programs. So anyway, wanted to open up for questions because I know everybody's got plenty of questions. Thank you.
Questions for CAL FIRE?
Yeah, of anybody.
Okay, yeah, for CAL FIRE. So like you just said, it's not if it burns, it's when, and for 100 years we've been suppressing all fires. And one example that Sheriff Allman mentioned was the 2008 fires, which happened in June, relatively early in the season, relatively mild conditions. And I heard at that time that it was a lot of the burning was close to the ground and beneficial for the forest. Is CAL FIRE going to permanently do complete suppression all the time? Because that seems to be, we're still repeating that pattern. My God, there's a fire, turn it out! Instead of, well, wait a minute, we're in mild conditions. We have the resources available early in the year. We could let this burn to a larger perimeter than usual. Is that an option that CAL FIRE is evolving into? Or?
That is an absolute great question.
Yay, Wally!
On so many levels. The biggest difference is the United States Forest Service has that principle. They manage a fire. Whereas CAL FIRE is charged with, in the Public Resources Code, suppressing fires in the watershed in the state responsibility area. So, it's a great question. I had the Scott's fire a few years ago, and we stopped it at 2,500 acres, and my father-in-law chewed me out for hours because it was doing no harm. We should have gone a few ridges south. But we are fighting fire on private property, on private citizens' land, and we're trying to keep it. You may absolutely be happy with this fire taking out this brush patch to improve the vegetation for the wildland and everything, and I probably agree with you, but the guy next to you may not. And if we can keep those, our policy is to keep 90% of our fires in the initial attack phase, which is the first 2 hours to the next morning. And while we have that directive and the fact that we're fighting fire on private property that is contiguous with other people's private property, I don't see it changing.
Sounds like a not yet then.
Yeah.
Well, Todd, can you talk about some of the prescribed burns that they're doing? Because it seems like CAL FIRE is doing more controlled burns that might not be the wildland fires that you're letting grow, but you are doing more controlled burns.
Absolutely, and if you're speaking of a fire like in June, during fire season where it's not a purpose fire, however, several years ago, let me back up, 25 years ago, we used to do quite a bit of control burning. We'd enter into an agreement with a local landowner, we'd send one engine and one pickup out, and we'd burn off a couple hundred acres. If the weather conditions were right, we'd burn it off, it'd go to the ridge line, we'd scratch a line around it, and we'd go in. And that kind of went away. And then it came back into the forefront, and now you'll see, we even have the CMS signs from Caltrans. We've been doing some burning in the Ukiah area. I've had several control burns in my battalion out on Highway 162. We're looking at some burning in the Eden Valley area, and these are part of the other CEQA, and I apologize, I spouted off CEQA. That's California Environmental Quality Act. That is, anytime we're involved, we have to cross off a lot of T's and check a bunch of boxes. We have to do ARC review. We have to search through the history to make sure there's nothing we're going to disturb by being out there. But we're doing a lot more control burning with the agreement of the local landowner. In some areas, it's Mendocino County is very fortunate because Mendocino unit, the public is used to burning and they're pro-burning. Humboldt County is the same. When you get toward the Bay Area, they have a little tougher time. But yes, we are doing a lot more VMP type burning.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Oh, so the question was, let's see if I can even remember it this far. So what is the backup system for the sirens? Who activates them? And I already forgot the third one. Oh, what do you do if you hear the siren? Okay, perfect. So the backup, so at the point we're at right now, we haven't identified a single siren model that this is a siren we're going to buy, this is where we're going to put it out and stuff like that. As I said, we're still in the initial, we haven't even found out yet if we've received the funding. We've applied for the funding, hopefully we receive it. We have started looking at different sirens out there. It kind of depends on which way we go with the sirens. The more powerful sirens, there's no backup system. The power's out, the power's out. The sirens that we have out on the coast some of them are 3-phase power, 220 commercial service. They're big, old air raid sirens from World War II. They're loud, they work well, they're mounted on telephone poles, and they actually generate so much energy the entire pole shakes wildly when they're activated from all the power of the sirens spinning up and going off. So those are loud, they're good sirens. The flip side is if the power's out, they don't work. So some of the sirens we have looked at are less powerful, but they are AC/DC sirens. So the idea is they're actually powered by batteries, and you just basically have a trickle charger on the batteries throughout the day, and to keep the batteries topped off, and then you can activate them and they'll sound. As I said, the flip side is they just don't go as far. They're not as powerful. They're not going to be heard as well. And that's the thing we're going to be looking at during the feasibility study that I talked about. Is some areas might, we might be able to find a location that has a backup generator already there, and we can put a more powerful siren in that location. And a location that doesn't have backup power or any power at all, we might have to go with a battery system, with solar or something else looking at it. The way that we're looking at them being activated is probably similar to the way our tsunami sirens are currently activated. They're activated via the county's radio system, so they're not reliant on like internet connectivity to be activated. We'll probably be able to activate them no matter what. So it's a more robust system, but they're still somewhat power dependent, and depending on the power depends on how loud they're going to be and how far they're going to carry. Brook Trail's a great example of, where the battery system would be ideal, but you're also a great example of where you need a powerful siren or a lot of sirens to be able to be heard because of the topography and because of the vegetation. And then what do the sirens mean? That's one of the things we've talked about quite a bit. We will, as part of this project, we have public education kind of built into it, and we'd be holding sessions similar to this as we got further along in it to kind of talk to people about what the sirens mean, and we'd have a huge public education, because the siren's useless if it goes off and no one knows what it means and no one responds. And one of the toughest things is, what does it mean, honestly? Because if you are on the coast, it means there's a tsunami and go to high ground. If you're here, what does it mean? If you're a visitor from the Midwest visiting the coast, you're gonna be looking for a tornado. If you're from the South, you're gonna be looking for a hurricane. You know, it really depends on, or if you live near like Diablo Canyon or somewhere else, it means that there's a radiation leak. Or you live near an oil refinery in Contra Costa County, it means that there's a hazardous material release and get away from the oil refinery. So it's going to be tough, but what we're kind of going for with public education is, it means kind of like what I talked about, that first notification. It means that there's something going on. It doesn't mean you immediately need to evacuate. It means there's something going on. Turn on the radio, try to find more information will be pushed out by the county, and that's where we're heading for with that sort of notification. And then I see you're in the back, but you had a question earlier too. So if the PG&E turns off the power, what does that mean for the siren? So if we have the battery backup sirens, we should be able to activate them. The cameras I would have to double check with our facilities folks, but I think that they should work, because we're putting them on our radio sites where we already have backup generators, because, you know, for example, we have a radio site up on Sanhedrin Mountain, and it lost power for 2 weeks this winter because a tree fell into a power line. So, and it's so remote, it took so long to fix it, and there was snow. So it took a while to fix it. So most of our areas are already on generator powered. Have to double check, but I'm pretty sure that the fire cameras would remain working even if they were de-energized. Yes?
Thank you. I don't know if this needs to go to Sheriff Allman. This is in theory. So say like we had a fire tonight. Is the Furco Road that you guys are talking about by the airport, is that accessible?
No.
No, that is not an option. So right now, tomorrow, what's available to?
Sherwood Road. And let me explain. CAL FIRE is entering into an agreement with the property owners to construct a shaded fuel break. Okay, we don't improve roads or anything like that, but I'll defer to Supervisor Haschak, who is working with them with the MOUs regarding others. But I've been on the road many times, and best case scenario is we send everybody, and this will be decided by the powers to be when they come up with the evac plan. We send everybody here out Sherwood Road, double file, and we bring in some of our resources through the Furco Road once it's been improved and once agreements have been made. But that is speaking purely from Battalion Chief Patten's preference, not anything that's been decided.
Okay, thank you.
And please, Mr. Haschak.
Yeah, one of the things about these private roads that we're trying to use is, and we're getting these memorandums of understanding with the landowners, is so that we can improve the road, we can have them ready at some point if there needed to be an escape route through that area. But the thing is, they're going to be gated. The sheriff will have the key. CAL FIRE will have the key. The sheriff is the one who calls the emergency and declares where the evacuation route is going to be. So he's the one who is going to make the call. And what we don't want is people just going, oh, we're going to go, for a ride down that and see how it is and make sure it's all right and everything. That's not what we're going for. But we want to make sure that these routes are available for the sheriff to determine, at that point.
So I want to get a show of hands here. We've got people from Brick Trails, we've got people from the outside areas further along Sherwood Road. In Brick Trails, I got two questions here. How many are from Brick Trails? Just a hand, quite a few. How about outside of Brick Trails? Okay, and actually equal. The next question, in Brick Trails, who now currently has an emergency water supply backup available? Okay, one, that's good. We got something started there.
There's a fire hydrant across the street from where I am.
No, that's good. We have you have a great fire department, all that. It's something on your property that could be utilized in the event of an emergency. That's what I'm drawing to. How about the folks outside the water district? As far as, and I'm talking about there, because that's a mixed area, you've got all sorts of different types of water development, water sources. Good. A dedicated, no, that's the one for the fire.
With that hookup.
You want the hookup, but you ideally don't want it tied in with the rest of your water system. It's for emergency use. Same thing in brook trails. They should be separate, and I'm actually guilty of them myself. I got 80,000 gallons in storage, but it's a combined system. I'm changing that now, so I can dedicate 5,000 just for fires. So let's stay on brook trails right now. Right currently, you can have a 2,500 gallon tank on your property. That may be someplace where you can put it in a location where it's accessible to you, which is number one, and you can fill it. In brook trails, you can't use your water district to fill it, so you have to fill it with rainwater. This may be for next year, but I'm trying to get the wheels turning in all of our heads as far as, well, I'm going to go over things pretty simply, kind of the 101 course on water storage for emergency. That could be expanded. So I'm trying to get the thoughts going in everyone's mind on this. For example, if you could collect that 500 gallon and you put in a pretty simple rainwater catchment. For example, an inch of rain on a 1,000 square foot roof gives you about 600 gallons. So you fill that tank up, especially this year with 60 inches of rain, you fill it up real quick. So it's full. Now how do you utilize it? The fire hydrant has, I didn't bring one in, I've got it on the table out there, but a hydrant. For a homeowner, something more simple, something that you could utilize. For example, if a fire comes through an emergency situation, your water supply could be interrupted, likely interrupted, or at least your pressure is going to go down. So just when you'd like to be able to hose things off, maybe with the intention of hosing things off and leaving, everyone has that on their own minds also. So it would behoove you if you had stored water and power could go out to, I'm not trying to alarm people, but you want to have, it's an emergency, you want to be ready. Ideally, you have that water tank full, and you have a gas pump, something that's independent of the power system. You can crank up, it has to be ready, pump has to be ready, the tank has to be ready, and some pretty simple water lines and some nozzles, so that you can basically water everything down real well, and then perhaps leave. It just gives you an added security. That's what people in brook trails could do. As far as filling those tanks, I won't go into that. I think we'll be talking about that further today. But how to fill it, right now it's pretty much just rainwater, as I understand. For people living outside of the district, now, as I said, you've got a lot of different sources of water. The main problem I see is people have water, they have storage water, which is fantastic, but there's no access to it. Ideally, if you're going to have a hookup for a fire department to come out, you've got to have, not ideally, but you have to have is a hydrant. They have to have something they can, number one, locate easily, a place where they can get in and out safely. But they can hook up and draw water out. It does not have to be pressurized, by the way. They can draw that water and pressurize it on their truck. If you're going to use it on your own property, you may still have the hydrant. Maybe you're going to tee off of that and put it on a, there's one right there. Thank you, Dave. That's an adapter. This allows you to put it on your gate valve. It's a little, is this 1.5 inches, Dave?
Yes.
Isn't it 2.5 inches is required here?
I think so, but they make one just bigger than that too.
Oh, no, exactly. I was just clarifying.
Sure.
So you can see the threads are different, and this has a protective cap. That's for the hydrant is set up so that the fire people can come and hook right up to it. They can't hook up to this. They need a special adapter. This is a small one. This is 1.5 inches. Typically, you need 2.5. If you use a hydrant, for example, because of our freeze conditions, you want to have the hydrant up in the air, usually about 2.5, 3 feet tall. It's usually galvanized pipe. It's cemented in the ground. Looks great. It looks like it can do something. That's great. The thing is, you want to protect that. So if you have a water line coming in from a storage tank, ideally, I like to drain the water out of that galvanized pipe so you won't freeze. If you freeze that pipe and break it, it's a lot of damage. It's a mess. You want to avoid it by all means. So what I do in a Christie box, kind of like a service box, let's say that's the hydrant. I'm using this as my prop. The water tank's coming over here. It's coming to the hydrant. Just before it gets there, I put a Christie box, it's in the ground, with a valve I can shut off. And then just downstream of that, almost to the hydrant, I put a little faucet. So I can shut the valve off here, open the faucet, it drains the water out of this pipe. Next summer, turn it back on. It just gets the water out of there. I just want to get that clarified. But this is required for a hydrant application, and this color's about right. My shirt's almost the right color too. But you need to have identification so that the fire people can find it. You also want to notify the fire department so they can put you on a map. They know where you are. They know there's a hydrant over there. The issue I find, though, is most people have, they'll have the tanks, but they don't have any mechanism of getting it out. And the mechanism they currently have is usually too small for any kind of an emergency. You want volume, and they've got a 3/4 inch pipe or maybe a 1 inch pipe. Typically, you want certainly a 2 inch, but the regulations for a hydrant hookup would be a 2.5 inch pipe. That is required. For an emergency, another thing is that you may need drinking water. Generally speaking, this is emergency water that maybe you collected from questionable sources, like a roof. And maybe it's been sitting in a tank for a while. So this is not drinking water. It's not for the garden either. It's for emergency. As soon as you start compromising and using it for something other than emergency, when you do have an emergency, you've compromised your volume of water. So leave it alone as much as you can. Actually, just leave it alone. Don't use it. And also don't drink it. So for emergencies, I also like to have a lot of bottled water available. You can haul it with you. What's in that tank is for firefighting or reducing the fires around the house. I think the main thing I wanted to take away is to be prepared. Have this ready. We're just leaving the winter season. We're starting the summer time now. I wish there was some way we could get these tanks filled in brook trails. I don't see that happening. But getting the plan in place, even for next year, was always a good thing. Where would you put the tank? Where could you put it? These tanks are about 6.5 feet tall, 6.5 feet wide. That's a 2,500 gallon tank. Not a large tank. You can stash that in pretty much anywhere, but you want to have access to it. And I'm thinking, first of all, for brook trails, just a gasoline like a Honda water pump. Something that would cost about $800, but it's ready to roll when you're ready. Be prepared. I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trout Unlimited. That would be with Matt. This is another addition to water storage with additional benefits for our community and for our watersheds.
Okay, I'm Matt Clifford. I work for Trout Unlimited, and a nonprofit focusing on trout and salmon conservation. I work for the California Water Program at Trout Unlimited, and specifically our program works in coastal California. So we do work all up and down the coast from, say, San Luis Obispo all the way north to the Oregon border. And we work in that area, it's coastal water work, which is a whole lot different than, say, the Central Valley, because we're working in that area with relatively small water users. So that's either like small communities like brook trails, or even more commonly, just folks who live out, beyond that, on a creek somewhere, and get their water out of a well or a spring, or even to a creek directly in their backyard. And we focus on watersheds. I'm a fish guy, obviously, as the name implies, but we focus on watersheds that tend to have struggling populations of coho salmon and steelhead. I'll talk about that. And so we do water work in general. I understand this is a panel about fire safety today, so I'm going to we don't work exclusively on fire safety, but I'll try and tailor my remarks to talk about fire water in particular and things that might be of use to folks. Most of what I'm going to say is going to be directly pertinent to people who live outside of brook trails, so they're kind of getting their own water from the creek. But we're interested in working with small communities like brook trails as well, and have community systems. So go ahead and give me the next slide. So the reason we're working where we are, we're working in creeks like this one, tributaries of Outlet Creek, like Willits Creek, because they've got salmon, they've got coho salmon in particular, and steelhead are the two species that are in there all summer. Come in and spawn, and they get the heck out of there before things get really low in the summer. But they got to have at least some flow in those creeks, over the summer, where the young steelhead and coho can survive. And so those are the creeks we really concentrate on. That's why we're in this area around Willits, and we're interested in projects around here. Our work here takes advantage of the obvious fact that it rains a lot here in the winter and it doesn't rain in the summer. It's pretty obvious. But the really good news in this geography is really there's plenty of water to work with. you just got to time your diversion right. If you collect water in the winter, you're not going to bother the fish or anybody else. Bottom line is there's plenty of water in the winter. And this is just a graph I like to show, the amount of water that people actually need. And this isn't just for fire, this is for everything. It's just a tiny fraction of the amount of rainfall we get every year, the amount of stream flow. So it's really good to work in this area where the fundamental story is we have enough water to do what we want to do for people and fish. Okay, next. And so this just illustrates that. Things obviously flow a lot in the winter and not in the summer. Next slide, we don't need to linger here. Again, what we're trying to do in my program is keep that long, low line flowing all summer from dropping to zero. These creeks get really naturally low in the summer, and that's what they're just, that's what they've always done, and fish are evolved to live with that. But we're just trying to keep those creeks with a little bit of flow in them all summer, and not going dry entirely. And it doesn't take a whole lot to dry them up completely, and that's why we tend to work with really small water users. We can really make a difference. But next slide. And so here's the thing: is we really focus on helping people store water. A really basic tenet of this is the projects we do, yeah, they're good for fish, they take pressure off the creeks, but they're also good for people, because it's much better for fire safety and for domestic use in general to have a good, solid supply of water that you stored in the winter than, it's better for, it's a more secure water supply for people, but it's also better to rely on that for fish rather than have, sucking every last drop you can out of the aquifer next to the creek or drying a spring up in the middle of the summer. It's just a lose-lose situation for both fish and people. So we really try to increase security for both with these projects. Next slide. We deal with, like I say, small water users of a couple different kinds. We look for folks who have a hose directly in the creek like this. Now, this isn't too common in my experience around here. Most people are on wells or springs, but this is, like at Humboldt, there's a number of folks like this with a direct pipe in the creek, and this is really the low-hanging fruit we like to work with because they're having the most direct impact on stream flow. Next slide. More commonly, what happens, and I'm going to wander here, I'm in trouble, but people are on wells. And people generally think of wells as being groundwater and not being regulated by the water board, or you don't need a water right, etc. But that's not strictly true because as we all know, aquifers don't exist out there. The groundwater doesn't exist in isolation from what's going on in the stream. It's all connected to some degree. The water in the aquifer tends to be flowing towards the stream and creating stream flow. Legally speaking, there's a presumption that if you're drawing water from the ground out of a well, you're drawing groundwater and that's not regulated by the state. However, if you've got a well, as people often do, if you're way back here, you're probably groundwater, no one's going to come bother you. The effect you're having in the stream is liable to be pretty small, and pretty, attenuated. If people have wells right down here next to the creek, which is often where the water is, there's a real good chance under state law, eventually you're going to be determined to be drawing from what's called a subterranean stream, which actually is connected to the stream, which is regulated just like surface water. Okay? And you may be doing that now and no one's bothering you, but as we get more and more drought conditions, and this happened down on the Russian River, for example, in Mark West, there's a lot more regulatory attention being focused on people who have wells right next to streams, and those can be determined to be drawing from surface water, and so there's a little bit of regulatory risk there. And so that's just a caveat I throw out. I think we're a long way from that in general, but like places like Mark West Creek, that's starting to happen, so that's something people should be aware of. And that's not the end of the world if that happens, but it's something to be aware of. Go ahead, the next slide. And so if you're drawing from next to a creek or a hose in the creek directly, I won't do a class in water law here, but a couple things I'll talk about that you need to know, because ultimately what we want to do for fire safety, as Larry is talking about, we really want people to be getting, store a good supply of water. And the way you do that, assuming you're drawing from surface water in California, the rights that come along with your land to use a creek are riparian rights. And those come automatically with your land. You don't have to get permission from the state or anything like that. You can just use a reasonable amount of water from your well or your creek diversion, and no one will bother you. Until you want to do the one thing that we're talking about today, which is store water. And the one of the main things you can't do with that riparian right is you can't store water. So it's really kind of legally, it's a lot of what I spend my time on as an attorney, is trying to help people navigate that kind of inconvenient aspect of the law. And to store water, technically, you have to get an appropriate water right. Yeah, go ahead. So the riparian rights that come with your property, you can use water from the stream a reasonable amount. We don't need to do well on that. That's what most folks who have a stream-side well or a hose are doing. Next slide. To store water, in the winter and use it in the summer, you need to get one of these and get an appropriative water right. And I don't need to say a lot about those, except I can here to tell you from experience, they're really hard to get. They're really expensive. They take anywhere from 1 to 5 years to get. They cost you thousands of dollars in expertise and permitting fees and things, and it's not a very viable path for small landowners who live on a creek. And so a lot of what I do is try to help people get these, and the fortunate thing is, given that these are so hard to get, about 20 years ago, the state created kind of a shortcut where you can get one of these appropriative rights, and this is going to be most pertinent to us today in fire safety. Next slide. And this is called a registration. And this is, shorthand, this is a way to get a relatively small amount of water, although more than enough for your purposes, from the state for a relatively, you fill out a form, pay them a couple $100 with some basic information, you can get an appropriate water right that'll let you store water. Next slide. The one that we care about most today for fire safety is a small domestic use registration. You may have heard of these. And so this allows you to get up to 4,500 gallons a day or 10 acre feet. And that's 10 acre feet is 320 million, plus million gallons of water. That's more than we need to worry about for today. But you can get up to that amount from the water board. The one downside is you have to renew these every 5 years and pay another $150 or so to the state. But that's a pretty small price to pay. And so this is the thing that really allows you to get fire storage water legally. And I really want people to be aware of these. I've had people that come up to me after talks like this and say, my neighbors and I want to store some water for fire. We're scared as hell because we almost got burned last year. But we feel like we have to hide what we're doing from the state because we know we're not supposed to store water. And I had some folks that say, well, we want to build a tank and put it in the garage so no one can see it. Well, you don't need to do that. These things are a relatively light permit lift. Regular folks can get one. And I help people with this all the time, and I'm happy to help people that need assistance with that.
As a homeowner, just a simple about $10 gauge, put that on a faucet, and then turn your incoming water off, whether it's from the district or from a water tank. If it's when the pressure's coming through, if it's reading 60 pounds of pressure and no faucet or bathroom, anything's on, you shut the water off, it should hold that pressure. If it doesn't hold the pressure, you've got a leak. If it comes down real quick, you got a fast leak. But it should hold pretty much indefinitely. And in reality, most people have leaks. It just happens. But you want to minimize that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, well,
I got a microphone, so I get to ask whatever I want, right? So I got a question. How much? This is a question for anybody in the room. We probably got some expertise there, but how much water, if I got someone out, say they're not even in brook trails, they're out on a creek someplace with where they're, a couple 1,000 square foot house or whatever it is, or smaller, how much fire water ought they have? I know in most counties that I talk to, they have a code and they want you to have like 2,500 gallons. I've never talked to anybody who either knows anything, is an expert in the area, or who lives out there in the creek that thinks that's nearly enough. But I don't really know how much is like a standard practice, and so I assume there's some, I don't know if that's 5,000 or 10,000 or if there's a rule of thumb, but I always ask this because I'm just kind of curious what answers are out there. Does anyone have
any takers?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. 2,500 gallons is a state responsibility area, so that's what CAL FIRE says. If you're going to build a new house out there, they're going to want to see that as dedicated water storage. So that's like a minimum. On another end of things, 30,000 gallons with a hydrant connection technically qualifies as a hydrant. And so if you want, when you get your insurance, they say, what's your nearest hydrant? Well, for people that are outside brook trails, they don't have fire hydrants, but if you had 30,000 gallons and a hydrant connection, that could technically qualify as a hydrant.
That makes you a hydrant.
So that gives you a little bit of an idea. But, a fire truck drafting off of that, there's different fire truck sizes, but they're going to be thousands of gallons if they're going to haul something out of there. But 25 is a minimum.
So 2,500 is a minimum, but not much. 30,000 makes you official water, a hydrant. And maybe there's anywhere, the more the better, obviously, but okay. Well.
No, thank you, Keith, for the clarification. And also for fire emergencies, a safe place to go. So let's say you're up in Sherwood Ranch or someplace like that, fire's coming in, people can't all get out. But if they had an area that the grass is mowed and kept cropped down tight, and there's a water supply, it's a refuge people can go to. That is something that we'll be looking at more, because things happen and access can change. So what's your other option? That would be something to consider also. But the main thing is, whatever you have, you want to keep it. So check for leaks.
Yeah, my name's John Simontacchi. I'm the CEO and founder of Firefree Coatings in San Rafael. In addition to that, I've been working 8 years with ASTM to develop fire standards for siding, vents, and eaves and soffits in buildings. And I'm also a voting task force code member for the State Fire Marshal's Office for the WUI codes. And this year, with the new governor, we've got a new mandate. In the past, we've always been dealing with new construction. We now have a mandate to provide solutions for people in retrofit. And in all that context, I'm going to use a couple words that have kind of disappeared from our language: common sense and cost effective. So what we do is, right now there's a lot of key points. One is the vegetation management. And I'll talk about the coding, but there's more to this. The vegetation management is a big deal. Right now, they're talking about 100-foot clearance. Is that realistic? Not really, because most lots are 50 by 100, 125 feet. So when you get into a community, it's going to take more than one person to do this. It's really going to take a community working together to do the brush clearing, and again, with common sense. One of the most vulnerable areas is shrubbery under windows. You can have the best window in the world. 20 minutes is all you're going to get out of that window. If you have shrubs under a window, if you're not in love with that shrub, I would say remove it, because that's going to cause a lot of damage. The other thing that's the other hot point is the vents. We had 52,000 buildings lost in the last 2 years. And a lot of it is not just the wildland interface with the brush cleaning and all that. It's the embers traveling miles through the air, burning isolated homes in random areas. The embers fly, they get into your attics, underneath your house, and they ignite and they burn from the inside out. We've seen this in test studies we've done at the University of Texas with grass fires. Brick buildings that are solid burning from the inside out from the embers. But one of the flaws that is in the fire safe, and they're only doing it because it's in code, our committee, we're going to trash this code. That's the 1/8-inch screen. They're trying to imply if you have an 1/8-inch screen, you're safe. You are absolutely not safe. We have spent 8 years at the University of California. The fire lab in South Carolina has done the studies. 1/8-inch screen is a disaster. That needs to be removed. There's only, the vent standard is this vent. There's several in the market. The vents have to be inspected by a third party. Yes?
This would be on like a heat source or an air source going out?
Well, it could be your foundation vent, your attic vent, roof vent. We make all kinds of, the company makes all kinds of vents. But it has to be stamped, and everything, the whole process is a third-party independent inspection certified and approved by the state of California. So 1/8-inch vents is going out the door. There will be no more 1/8-inch vents. That will have to be corrected. The coatings historically have been kind of shunned a little bit because of the lobbying efforts by the chemically treated lumber industry. But that's also going by the wayside. We know from all the studies we have done on sidings over the years, and I have a table, I only have one copy, but you could come by. We started with Brady Williamson back in 1997 on the WUI with testing siding. And all these sidings have different burning rates, combustion rates. And there's some other misconceptions. They think that hardy board, the cementitious siding, is a great fire. It is not. 10 minutes, it cracks, it dehydrates, and it's on the ground. It's thin, it dehydrates. And in conjunction with that, we're going to take some of the language that's being used today in the current code is going to be removed. One is this non-combustibility issue. The test is based on a small sample, 2 cubic inches of sample that's in a little cylinder, and it has absolutely no relevance to anything as far as fire safety of a building. And a classic example is steel can pass the non-combustibility test standard, yet steel fails worse than wood. Steel starts failing at 900 degrees, total failure of 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't take much temperature to get into a wall cavity for that failure to happen. So that's going to be done with. What we're going to is called ignition resistance. It's a 30-minute test, and it will stop this huge flame over it. Again, it's hard to see from here, but it'll stop that kind of fires from occurring, and it'll be applicable because we're trying to come up with a system of codes that will harden a building, the fire safety of a building. Other things that we're talking about, of course, are possibly shutters over windows. Nobody really has a shutter yet, it's still in the works. You know, garage fires, we're getting fires, you know, with embers in LA especially, a lot of fires went through the garage doors. People don't park cars in garages anymore, they're storage facilities. Fire gets into the garages, ignites the storage material, the fire expands in the garage, and it's through the whole house. So there's a lot of things we're looking at to try to bring people to, they can select what they want to do. If you're, yes?
I thought there was a building code that you had a 1-hour firewall between the garage and the house. You're saying that's not working?
Well, I'll tell you on that. In fact, they aren't. What we're finding is, of the 52,000 structures we've lost, the E119, which is a 1-hour, 2-hour, I'll get a little technical here, it's a post-flashover test. Fire's raging away, it's spilling everywhere, and they're asking that wall or ceiling to hold up for 1 or 2 hours and keep it confined to the room of origin. That absolutely is not happening. The system is broken.
What John was just saying about the home ignition zone, we talked a little before that talk. Lauren's going to talk in detail about it, and things like vents and different other kind of techniques of keeping fire from getting into your house are important, but also just keeping that area clear around your house is so much important. So Lauren Robertson. Hey.
I'm the Vice President of the Pine Mountain Fire Safe Council, which is on the southeast corner of Willits. And I've been involved with the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council since 2003, kind of off and on. Fire Safe Council also has been off and on. So an event like this, don't take it for granted, because a couple of years with no fire and everybody goes away. So I'm going to focus on this topic in a little bit more detail that was just covered. The home ignition zone. And I want to start with a quote from a fire historian, Stephen Pine. Stephen Pine's from the Arizona State University. Very interesting if you get an opportunity to look at some of this stuff online. He says if we keep fighting a war with fire, we're going to lose that war. We're going to spend a lot of money, we're going to lose a lot of homes, take a lot of casualties, and ultimately the approach that we've taken with fire isn't working, doesn't work, and is not going to work going forward. What I'm going to focus on is the home ignition zone and just a little bit of context. So since 1910, roughly, we've had a policy in the United States of fire suppression. And that fire suppression has caused a lot of problems. Just to give context, roughly 200 years ago, because of cultural burning, Native American burning, and fires started by lightning strikes and such, close to 100 million acres burned each year in the United States. So contrast that with right now, where we're burning each year less than 10 million acres, and that's combined with fires, wildfires, and prescribed burning. So the amount of burning has gone way, 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 way down. And the effects of not burning, of not having fire on the landscape, has increased fuel continuity. So where we used to have open areas in forests, now there's less open areas, and when a fire starts, it can continue all right through the forest. Keep in mind that houses also provide fuel continuity. Also, fuel density has increased, so there's more underbrush. I went up to Paradise a couple weeks ago on a tour, and it's all the underbrush is burned out. And that's what we have to try to replicate before we have a fire like that. And then, of course, fire suppression has affected the composition of our ecology. It's changed which trees grow first, which trees would normally be burned out. Shrubs would normally be burned out on a 3 to 5 year cycle in California. So fire is a natural disturbance. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. We're going to have big fires. We're going to have little fires. That's normal. And most ecosystems developed throughout the world with fire. And if you think about it, humans also developed with fire. We evolved with fire as well. So just a little bit of background to go into what was said a minute ago. There's 3 stages of wildfire. This is very, very simplified. Before the fire front, when you have ember storms, that's what we want to worry about with our houses, is not getting embers on our houses. And that lasts about 30 minutes, depending on a whole bunch of things, topography, wind. The Redwood Valley fire, they didn't have 30 minutes before the fire front got to them. Okay. Then the fire front happens and it passes fairly quickly. If you're not a firefighter or you haven't looked at time-lapse photography and you just look at the news, we don't know that the fire front passes quickly. So this is an important argument in favor of defensible space, because the fire front passes quickly enough, and if the envelope of your home can withstand an ember storm, your house will not burn down necessarily in 15 minutes if the fire doesn't penetrate. We'll go into that a little bit more. And then after the fire passes, you have smoldering for 5 hours up to several days afterwards, including still embers floating through the air. Okay? How things catch on fire? Radiant heat. If you had a wall of flames and it's more than 30 feet away from your house, we say 100 feet, but if the wall of flame is more than 30 feet away from your house and there's no wind blowing the flames onto your house, it probably will not catch your house on fire. So just keep that in mind as we go through. So radiant heat is one way things catch on fire. Direct flame contact is another way things catch on fire. That's pretty obvious. That's what we want to avoid. That's why we do defensible space. And then the third way homes catch on fire is from embers. Now, more than 80% of homes burn down because of embers. Most houses, the vast majority of houses burn down because of ember penetration. And homes burn down by embers because they're flammable.
Okay, I'm Paloma Hill. I'm with Sherwood Firewise, and I'm representing the safety net side of Sherwood Firewise. If anybody here wants to know about safety net, hey, listen up. A lot of you probably know about it, but I think I'll give a brief what it is. Safety net is a system that is designed to tell you if there's a fire in the corridor when it happens. And the purpose of that is to give you basically an early warning so you can prepare. We're not a system that will tell you when to go or get ready to go or anything like that. We're just going to give you notification that there's a fire in the corridor or adjacent to it. And that would include some sections of Highway 20 and some sections of 101 where it's adjacent to the corridor. And I suppose Willits too. And it goes all the way out from the beginning of Sherwood Road to the Sherwood Ranch at the end. So last year we had a small system that was basically for the rural sectors of Sherwood Road that got started at the gates. And what we did was we texted groups of neighborhood representatives, and then they called or texted whatever was required the people in their neighborhood. And then we expanded when Sherwood Firewise got involved. We expanded to telling the other rural subdivisions on Sherwood Road. I think one of our important functions that we did last year was we were able to key into a fire out at Sherwood Ranch. And we were able to get people from Sherwood Ranch to go out there and put it out before the fire department got there. So I think that we can serve not only to tell people what's going on, but we possibly can get neighbors involved to help in a situation like that when people are way out. The other thing is we were picking up this information from several sources. Scanners probably was the main one, which was mainly Keith doing it. We need more people. We're calling them scanner scouts, if anybody wants to do that. And people had good views and they were noticing what was going on around them. Some people picked up something on social media and notified us. One person, the one at the ranch that we had, was somebody knew somebody at Brook Trails Fire Department, and they called her and said, my God, we're going out to Sherwood Ranch to put a fire out. They told us, and we told them. We told the ranch itself. So there's a lot of ways we get the information. Then from there, this year what we're doing is we're creating a database to pull all the information in, because we're bringing in Brook Trails. Brook Trails has thousands of people. We're not going to be able to do this with texting anymore. So we're trying to create, right now we're creating a database that is not online. We're collecting paper forms. We're putting the data in. And then once we get that information, we find out there's an incident, and we're using a call center to call people or text people or whatever their preference is. We're picking up people that not only live on Sherwood Road, but also people are in the corridor, but also people who have property here and maybe live outside, and also people who have associations with Sherwood Road, which would include someone who works here regularly, has a mother that lives here and maybe doesn't hear very well, or whatever your situation is. If you want to be on the thing, if you have a Sherwood Road address, we will let you know if you tell us about it. We have a forum that's out there at the booth, at the Sherwood Firewise booth, and you can fill that form out, and then we'll put you on the list. And we're still building this, so be patient with us, and don't expect us, please, to be the ones that tell you it's time to go. We'll tell you there's something going on, and that's a really important distinction. You need to sign up for what the sheriff's got. He's got Nixle. They've got Nixle, and they've got Mendo Alerts. And both of those systems are the systems that will tell you that there's an evacuation, and maybe they'll tell you about a warning as well. But last year, that was their tendency, was to tell you when it was time to go. So, but we will tell you there's a fire. You can prepare for it. You can get your cats. You can get your kids. You can drive back up here and help somebody get out. You can do things that will be useful. You'll also know about some fires that don't pertain to you, because they may be further out. You can ignore them until they get bigger, or you can pay attention. You can get on social media, find out what's going on. But don't call 911 if you hear from us. Don't call the sheriff. Try to find out. We're going to send out some resources about how to find out more, but please, we don't want to make this hard on the sheriff. So we're trying to take care of it within that unit. Do you want to say something?
Sure. Yeah, well, you know, the idea of this is basically comes from the old phone tree. I mean, we're coming from the grassroots up, where what you just heard from the sheriff and the OES is talking about from the top down, and they serve the whole county. So we're working on how do neighbors talk to neighbors and neighborhood groups, and building neighborhood coordinators that have those neighbors so that they can learn about each other, and then those groups into zones, and those zones into subdivisions, and we have representatives at each of those levels, so that we have people watching out for each other, learning more about each other, and signing up for these services, so that if you want to be notified, we can send those notices out. The problem with the old phone tree system was literally the telephone. If you wanted to call 10 people, you had to make 10 phone calls. You know, so you hello, are you there? And you get their answering machine or whatever. So it's not a real effective means of trying to get the word out. So even the small neighborhood groups might have a phone tree. We're trying to look at the overall Sherwood corridor and saying we have the technology now with the internet, and it is reliant upon the internet working and the cell phones working and those things too. So we're trying to get it, the way we're doing it is as this dispatch. So CAL FIRE does a dispatch. They're the ones that dispatch for the whole county. As they say, there's a structure fire at 2727 Goose, we're going to be entering, and there's a structure fire at 2727 Goose, and sending that notice out, and you're going to get a ping. Now, you may be out at Sherwood Ranch and say, I don't really care about a structure fire at Goose, but if it turns into a bigger fire and it closes down Sherwood Road or whatever, who knows what's going to happen. And this was that discussion during their session. Would you rather have too many notices or not enough notices? So we're sort of erring in the beginning on saying, if there's a fire within the corridor, we're going to let people know, because there's helicopters flying over, there's bombers dropping stuff, there's sirens going off, there's smoke in the air. You know, people are already thinking, what's going on? How can I? They're calling the fire department. They're calling 911. They're calling sheriff. And those guys are saying, don't do that. So we're trying to build our grassroots system up so that we can get that right off the scanner, get it right out to the community, that's a confirmed event. And a lot of them last year, we had like less than 10, maybe 12 at the most, we're out within minutes sometimes, or certainly within half an hour a lot of times. So it's something that didn't build into anything bigger, but it could have. And this is part of the point about we don't want to wait and say, well, it's just one house. Oh, now it's 3 houses. Oh, gee, we should have put out a notice a while ago because now it's turning into a conflagration. So that's part of what we're trying to work on, is the sensitivity of, do you want to know about everything, or do you just want to know about the stuff that's dangerous? Because we could send out, like last year, some of the stuff we had was there was a lot of smoke coming in. People, where's the smoke coming from? Again, instead of calling the fire department, instead of calling 911, we said, oh, that's the smoke from the Reading fire, or that's the smoke from the Paradise fire, whatever. I mean, this kind of information really helps because it brings the anxiety level down. It's like, okay, there's not a fire locally, we don't have to worry about that, and that now I know where the smoke's coming from. So there's things like that, or maybe there's traffic conditions. The road gets closed, and you might want to know about that. It's not life-threatening to you per se, but it's something that if you want to know about those kind of things, we can do that too. Now, we're not going to tell you that it's, cheap flowers down at Flowers by Annette for 10% off if you go down today or anything like that. It's only going to be related to public safety kinds of issues. But, and again, last year we only had less than a dozen types of incidents like that that would have been worthy of reporting to the community. The thing I want to say about, from my perspective, is the technology that's there. The CAL FIRE does the dispatches, and if you have a scanner, you can hear those dispatches. So if you don't have a scanner, it's something that you might want to think about getting. I can't get scanner at my place. I'm up over the ridge on the other side of the ridge, and I'm in a hole there where I can't hear the scanner. But my cell phone service works because I've got a line to a cell tower, and there's an application for a cell phone called Broadcastify. And that basically is a service that will monitor these local dispatches and put them onto your cell phone. And you can even do some trick things, like you can say, I don't want to know about anything until it's over like a 10% above normal traffic or something like that. So that's what I listen to. I listen to the Broadcastify channels. Now, last year there was a channel out of Potter Valley that had the CAL FIRE dispatch and the EMS dispatch. So it was pretty specific to our needs, but that one went away. There's only one other channel for our area, and that includes all the police and all the ambulance and all the fire all together. So you're constantly getting all the stuff. There's some vagrant doing something, or somebody broke into something, or things that we don't care about as much. And it also has really bad quality. I have a real hard time making out what they're saying. So we applied for a grant to the Community Foundation, and we were awarded that grant. And we're going to set up a new Broadcastify channel, going to be based out of Willits. It will monitor both CAL FIRE and also Brook Trails Tactical. Because when Brook Trails gets called out, CAL FIRE will say there's a fire in Brook Trails or Sherwood or wherever it is. Brook Trails will respond to that, more than likely to be a first responder. We'll be able to hear on that scanner what they're doing as well. And that wasn't available in the prior Broadcastify channels. So we really narrowed it down. We're probably going to add a ham radio channel into that too. It's a stereo system, so you can listen to one thing on one side or another thing on the other side. So you can actually monitor CAL FIRE and what they're doing, and Brook Trails Tactical and what they're doing separately or together. So, it's something that we, as the scanner scout level of the safety net, will have access to a lot more information, a lot clearer. And now we're working on how do we get that information from that scanner scout into a tag into the system that other people on the root level of that of our phone tree, or 21st century phone tree as I call it. There's a whole lot of people representing these subdivisions. We want to put something in that lets them know right away what's going on, and then we'll send out to groups. So that way we can have people that are local area reps know what's going on. Like there was a fire by Barbara's house up on Goose, and it wasn't a big deal. It was a little brush fire outside, a debris fire, but it was in your neighborhood, and so we knew right where it was. We knew you were there. We could let you know. That's the kind of thing we can do with this. But as Paloma was saying, it's going to take the sophistication of having a database and we're building all of that. Paloma's been building. It's an incredible piece that's this relational kind of database, so we can say, you know, we know about this fire in this area. We can target some information out to those areas if we want to. We can build information over time about the special needs that she was talking about, and that can get to our neighborhood coordinators. So again, people within a neighborhood know that somebody's hard of hearing or somebody's disabled or whatever it is, those special needs, because the thing we've seen in the statistics, it's neighbors helping neighbors are the ones that are helping to survive. It's not so much the sheriff coming down your street honking the horn saying, get out of here. You know, it's all your neighbors saying, I need to go help Joe because I know their car is broken down or whatever the heck it is, or they don't drive, or, you know, all those things that you can think of, including animals and other kinds of issues. So it's a big issue for us to do this. We're starting slow, we're building up. This year we should have a functional system, so as these calls come in on fires this fire season, we'll be able to relay that information out to you so you'll know what's going on when you hear the siren going off, if it is, or you're hearing the road, you know, the traffic on the road sirens, or the PG&E, you know, helicopter flying over. It's like, no, it's not CAL FIRE, it's PG&E. I mean, all these things happened last year that we let people know what was going on, and people were saying, thank you so much. Now I know what's going on, I feel a lot more comfortable. What we're trying to do is to give you enough notice so that if it does become the evacuation thing that the sheriff's going to eventually come in on, and we have that little bit of time, you're going to have more time to prepare, to think about all the things that you're going to need to do before you get that warning notice. And as Rick Ehlert was saying from OES, if you get a warning notice, you might as well think of it as an evacuation notice, because if they're warning you, chances are the mandatory evacuation might come in seconds or minutes or whatever. So that's the time to just go ahead and get everything together, get your go bag, get your car, and if you have any sensitivities at all to smoke or any of that kind of stuff, just get out. You know, like you said, if you're driving down the road and 5-10 minutes later, it's like, oh, we canceled that, you can go back home. But when you evacuate, you need to take the things with you that you need, because you can't get back in once you evacuate. And this is another thing that our grant is going to pay for, is evacuation planning. And for those of you who were at that session, you heard sort of the enforcement, the agency side, but you heard a lot of questions about what can we do as individuals. That's what our workshops are going to be this summer, is how can you prepare your home so if you have to leave it, not only do you take your prescriptions and your pets, but you also leave your house in a defensible way. Like, you make sure you've done all that home hardening stuff, and if you have time, pull any gasoline containers or your lawnmower from under the deck, or your deck chairs that are made out of cloth that can burn, all that stuff. Just throw it out in the yard, get it away from the house kind of stuff. That stuff you can do in minutes if you're thinking about it, if you know. So that'd be the thing. If we said, it looks like this is a big fire happening, if now it's the second stage of alert, they haven't issued a warning yet, you're still already thinking, I need to get my go bag, I need to get my car, I need to go ahead and clear stuff out. You should have already prepared your home for the home hardening. I just wanted to say one more thing about that. We sent out a link to some of our neighborhood coordinators on a CAL FIRE video of what the firefighters do when they come in after you're evacuated and you're gone, and you heard Chief Patten talk about it. They come in and triage the neighborhood because they're preparing to try to fight that fire. Now, they're not going to fight the fire in a wildfire. They're going to come through and look at the houses and try to figure out which ones can they save. And they literally, in this video, is so great because they're up there sweeping stuff off of people's decks and pulling flammable things away from their house, and even cleaning their gutters, and leaves out of the gutters. All the stuff that people should have done themselves, these firefighters are out there doing that. And then when they got it relatively clean, they go to their safe place, let that flame front come through. And you saw Lauren's, if you saw Lauren's presentation, she's saying within the 5 minutes to like 30 minutes is when this big thing goes through, and then it's sort of smoldering and burning and whatever. So they let that front come through, and then they go back to those houses they prepared and put out those little spot fires, because there will be embers and there will be spot fires. So if you've done a good job preparing your place, they're going to come up and look at it and go, man, this place looks great. We'll definitely save this place. As compared to they drive up and you just got trash everywhere and gasoline cans and who knows whatever. And they're going to say, sorry, goodbye. You know, and so we need to learn for ourselves how to do that and then help each other. And that's where the safety net builds from the grassroots up, neighborhood groups into these zones and whatever, so we can sort of build a step at a time and help each other. We're also applying for more grant funding, group purchasing, things like that we can do as a group, because money will always come into this, or what can we do for ourselves to be better prepared.
Question?
Yeah.
Without putting too fine a point on it, on this grant for the Broadcastify and 21st Century Poetry. Do you think that'll be up, estimated by, say, August?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering about timing. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the equipment itself is pretty easy. So the Broadcastify channel it's two scanner radios hooked into an encoder that puts that onto the internet, and then Broadcastify gets that at their internet connection, and they put it out on the cell phone.
Yeah, I just wanted to have an idea as to whether we might expect it this.
Well, I'm
whether early in the summer, later in the summer, December.
Yeah, we'll have the equipment in place sooner. The hard part, we have to go through some testing. So Paloma's just finished doing the database. We've got over 100 forms already. We're entering all that data in. We're going to do some testing probably in the next month or so of not small scale, not everybody. We'll pick out a dozen people and we'll send out notices to them and then check back. Did you get those notices? So on and so forth, and start testing the
system. So we should start sending chocolate and coffee to Paloma.
Yeah. Well, you should make sure you have your safety net form filled out so we have your information. That's what we need to do.
Well, and there is a point where safety net will be online, at which point you can make modifications to it, you can add stuff. We're hoping that the paper form is kind of a real slimmed down version of what we hope to have in the end. We hope to ask other questions in the end, which are like there's little memo fields in this form, but things like, do you have a pond? Do you have a locked gate? Do you have a steep driveway? Do you have a, are the cars all over that you can't get through? What's going on at your place? Do you want to help us? Could you help us with this or that? Do you have some money? Those kind of questions. So,
take all your money.
That's right.
But one of the things to think about is if there is a fire in the area, one of the things that we've worried about out here is that the power might be shut down. So the thing that I like about Safety Net is we're ahead of the game. We can tell people before, if there's a little fire in a little house in Brick Trails, they're not going to shut all the power down. But once it's an evacuation thing, PG&E will shut you down, at which point you may not get your notice. You can do some things to be more prepared. You can have a backup for your phone, a backup battery for your phone. You can have some radio that you can turn on with batteries. But really, we want to be able to tell you early, because I live rurally. And because I live rurally, I think about things from a rural perspective. People have horses out there, they have acreage to maintain, they have ponds that may not, they have water tanks that may not be full. They have large areas to deal with, they have kids that may be running around in the woods. Those are the things that we want to, and people in Brick Trails have the same kinds of things. If you have somebody you need to help that you've left at home, or dogs you've left locked up in the house, you can maybe get home and do that. If you have what Keith is talking about, neighborhood representatives, people who are willing to really get to know people in their neighborhood, you could maybe call them and say, let my dogs out, or get them in the car in case we got to go, or something, and their names are, and they like steak. Those are the kind of things that you can do to be prepared. And so we're hoping that that's what we can give you with Safety Net. And it's not completely an infant stage, but we're sort of in a teenage stage, and we could use help with everything, and we definitely with neighborhood representatives, definitely with people willing to listen to scanners, definitely with people with great views, definitely people that want to really help and get to know their neighborhoods. That way we can make it a whole community of effort. But right now we're building lists, we're building names, we're building phone numbers, we're building preferences for you want to be called, or do you want to have a text, or how do you want to be notified, where do you live? And then we eventually will create areas so we can say, oh, they're there, that's actually very critical. And if we have information about your place that's critical, we might be able to share that with search and rescue or something like that. So hopefully we can help you in more ways than just, here it is, something's up. But that's what we're starting with, and I hope everybody joins. I'd like everybody to get out of here if there's trouble. Yeah?
I don't know if this is even related, but we just moved up here not too long ago, and everybody keeps saying, well, there's only one way in and out, and if there's only one way. Now, I've had other people tell me there's been 5 ways, it's just not necessarily into Willits. So how do you know the funnel effect? Everybody's trying to go down one road. What is safe to get to, or if there's an alternate route? Is there a map, or?
Well, Keith Keith can address that, but I do want to say.
I don't think I can come to this wall though if there's a fire, so.
Well, that was mailed to all the residents of Brook Trails and Spring Creek, so you should have gotten that in the mail. It was 6 months ago, so.
I haven't received
Okay,
it.
I think they have them over at the.
At the office?
At the Brook Trails office, I think
Yeah.
they have a stack of them, yeah.
But there is a road that cuts up to Laytonville, out Sherwood, and those are the main exits we have right now, the main
Because we
road.
don't have an all-wheel terrain, four-wheel drive, we're city people.
You don't need an all-wheel terrain to go out.
You know what I'm saying?
Go out the Laytonville exit, try it yourself. It's not all terrain.
Okay.
But the thing is that with the safety net, what we hope will do also is it will create more of a staged evacuation.